how does Primo Brands look to use these analytics, both initially and then further on? Are the additional visionaries, activities, significant weather, extreme weather, all those sorts of things? Right? How do you use those analytics now and in the future?
Thanks. That's a great question. And like I said, I started with the company 2 years ago, and it was very interesting. The weather was talked about a lot in a lot of sound bites, but there wasn't any was a lot of hey, I think it's going to do this during this time, so on and so forth. And it was very interesting to try to understand what was happening in weather with all kinds of other variables that come into play. And so, I've really there's really two main use cases for us, in terms of leveraging weather-driven demand. One for me is around explainability. So that is about trying to explain what happened, and then how do you action it more in the future to understand it. My prior company, we implemented what's called a help drive this driver-based forecasting, right? So really moving away from a black box model, you get all these stats and here's a number. We were really focused on explainability, and I was willing to sacrifice points of accuracy for explainability around distribution, promotion, media, macroeconomic in terms of especially the water category. There's huge correlation to GDP, and then even the competitive environment as well. But then weather, for the company, for us at Primo Brands, as was mentioned, there's some pretty big swings in demand. A lot of it has to do with temperature primarily. But we couldn't answer those questions. And so initially talked with Planalytics and man, this is a no-brainer for us to get better at this in terms of with explainability. I don't want to go through the exercises I was going through to try to explain it before pulling all this data together. But it's been a great partnership for us. And like I said, the first is around explainability, and think about your annual operating plan, right? And so a lot of it's around you'll hear peak and then the shoulder months, especially in the north as well. When it gets warmer, you see a spike in demand. And so we've been able to leverage this information, like I said, as we're annual planning, understanding those comps, but more importantly, what other activities do we have to do to help offset some things that we saw in the marketplace that you really can't control. So that's one of the first use cases. And the second is very similar to what Randy had talked about, is we're actually implementing a demand sensing capability, which what we've seen is this improved our forecast accuracy by about 20% within 28 days. This has taken multiple demand signals from orders, shipments, historic as well, and then also working on trying to, with retailers, as you mentioned, your forecast, would love to bring that in with ours and that'd be even really good sweet spot for us. But then also now what we're doing is how do you leverage the 14-day the temperature forecast and bring that into our forecast, right? And so from a 3-digit zip perspective, with all the history that Planalytics and leveraging the coefficients with future forecasts, right, which we know there's some variability with that, to build into as well. And what that really drives is very similar to what Randy said in terms of making sure you have the right product at the right place at the right time, collaborating as well, and just coming into a potential heat wave, then how it comes out of that as well is really, really critical.